Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, and we will continue in our series looking at the variations between men and women. Today we will focus on the emotions of a woman. Years ago there was a movie entitled The Scent of a Woman. But we're going to talk about how physiologically the emotions of a woman are very, very important to understand. There are primarily two types of emotions. There's what we call the primary emotion, and this is the individual's internalized perception of the physiological conditions which result from some type of stimulus. For instance, a person does not automatically know to run or pet a dog until an internalized physiological condition has been implanted inside the thinking of the individual. And then there are secondary emotions. This might be viewed as an aftershock of the primary. So the primary says, if the dog bites or if the dog barks, the secondary emotion might be fear triggered. Or if the dog lies down or roll over, the secondary emotion might be that of happiness. So the primary is the event, but the secondary is the response to the event. It is very important to understand, however, that the secondary emotion is learned. And when we look at the emotions of women in terms of their response to men, many times those emotional responses, the secondary, are learned based on the primary. Emotions are normally ranked into two groups, either positive or negative. When we talk about positive emotions, we're talking about things in a range. For instance, moving from being glad to being elated. So a person may be somewhere in between. They may be glad, they may be happy, they may be delighted, they may be joyful, and then they might be elated. Or ranging from hopeful to certain. But in between there's a large range. It might start out as hopeful, expectant, relieved, satisfied, assured, and certain of an event. When we talk about negative emotions, they too range. For instance, a person may range from being tired to being drained. So the movement might look something like this. I am tired, I am burdened, I am wearied, I am exhausted, I am drained. Or ranging from nervous to panic. But then there are the emotions in between. I am nervous, I am scared, I have a fear, I'm shocked, and I'm in a complete panic. So when we look at those emotions, we must also consider the range of those emotions. Now, the development of them. The proper labeling of emotions by the female is really paramount. The proper labeling of emotions may have been improperly modeled through verbal expression and or nonverbal expressions. If negative emotions are labeled as positive, or if positive emotions are labeled as negative, it creates an atmosphere of mixed signals, which leads to a breakdown in personal health, a breakdown in social relationships, a breakdown in spiritual growth opportunities, and a breakdown in family interactions. So when we look at the female emotional development, they must be labeled properly. Let's talk about 6 basic female emotions. Paul Ekman of the University of California believes that emotions one experience is a person's attempt to simply cope with whatever challenges they are called upon to face. Here are the 6 emotions that Ekman presents: happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, anger, and distrust. And his argument is, regardless of which of the 6 and the ranges, it's simply a person's attempt to cope with the challenges that they are presently facing. Now, there are 3 factors related to female emotional response: proximity, similarity, and physical attraction. Let's briefly talk about the 3. When I look at proximity, I'm talking about the closer people are physically, the higher the potential for developing a better relationship with each other. This is known as the propinquity effect. The closer one is, the more likely they are to relate. Secondly, when we talk about similarity, people who are closer in their thinking related to values, intellect, outlook on life, interest, view of the world and people in the world, it really correlates to an emotional response that is more favorable. Physical attraction. Although beauty is in the eye of the beholder, physical attraction dictates emotional response. Sounds of one's voice, the height, the complexion of an individual, the facial features, all of those contribute to whether or not the emotions are going to be positive or negative. And it has nothing to do with whether we like it. It's what's driving from the inside of the individual. And in this case, we're talking specifically about the female. Now, emotions can be manipulated and abused. And depending on how those emotions were initially stimulated, the primary, it's going to move forward to determine the secondary responses. In the book of Genesis chapter 3, verses 6 through 10, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Now, the challenge with this text is, what caused the woman to be drawn to just the joy components of the temptation? Because in the Garden of Eden, ever since she had been there, it had been filled with nothing but positive primaries. And because of all of the positive primaries, all of the secondaries were positive. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked. Now you see the problem with the results. She responds favorably, but the primary was a negative, and it was disguised as a positive. But her responses had been learned to respond joyfully. And she failed to really examine the source of the joy. And they hid themselves. And then the text says, they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden of the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and now watch the emotion. I was afraid because I saw something for the first time, and it caused an unrest inside of me. The emotion of fear comes from some type stimulus, even in females. I'll see you back in class again tomorrow. And as we work through this, I hope that every female and every male understands the importance of not stimulating negative responses in each other. Don't be late, and don't skip class.